Now in this video, because it's cherry season, I've decided to make some cherry wine. Hi, I'm Charles and welcome to DIY Fermentation, your site for doing fermentation on a shoestring budget. Now before I begin, I'd like to give a special shout out to Terry Collier and Sher Yang for becoming new members to this channel, and also another special shout out to David Constantine for making a donation which will help me buy more equipment, or to pay for the equipment that I've already got a whole lot easier. Thank you very much. Okay, to make this wine, we will be using the following. Going to be using 6 pounds of fresh, unpitted cherries. Going to be using approximately 3 pounds of sugar. That might change. Check the final recipe at the end of the video for any changes. I'm going to be using a Red Star Premier Classique wine yeast. If you don't have it, use whatever you got. For our tannin substitute, we're going to be using black tea. For our acid blend substitute, we're going to be using the juice of half a lemon. Get back up there. To bring our measure up to 1 gallon or 4 liters, depending on how you're making it, you need fresh water. You need something to do primary fermentation in, possibly one with a wide mouth opening so you can get your fruit in and out. This particular fermenter does come with its own built-in airlock, which is that there. If not, you will most definitely need your own airlock with bung and something to do secondary fermentation in, because after about a week in here, it's going to go in here. You'll need something to determine how much your alcohol level is. So we're looking at having the need for a hydrometer. Straining bags will always be helpful, optional. And before you do anything, you want to make sure that all of your equipment and utensils have been sanitized with your sanitizer of choice. And that's what I'm going to be using to make this wine. Now, probably the easiest way of dealing with these cherries is if you've got a cherry pitter to go ahead and pit these, remove the pits from these cherries. But since I don't have one, my option is going to be this way. I'm going to remove all of these little stems. Okay, with that having been done, the next thing we want to do is that we want to give these cherries a good rinse. And then we want to put them in the freezer for 24 hours. And the reason for that is that we're going to try and break up the cell wall to help extract some more of the juice so we can move on to the next step. Okay, now that our cherries have come out of the freezer and have thawed out quite sufficiently, the cherries themselves are now quite soft. And one thing about the cherries being soft, I wouldn't say mushy, kind of close to it, but soft, is that whereas before we couldn't do anything with the pits in the cherries, now because they are so soft, we can actually just squeeze out the pits and put those aside and move on to the next one. It is a juicy affair, so you quite seriously want to do this over the sink if you're going to do it this way. If you don't want to do it this way, then you just go ahead and start mashing them up with a potato masher, which I had planned to do anyway. But since this is kind of working, it's a slow process, yeah, you know. But I'm going to do this instead. I was going to macerate the berries, the cherries rather, but since this is working, I'm going to go ahead and do this. So let me finish this up and move on to the next step. All right, now that that's done, we can proceed to the next step. We're going to take 2 quarts of our water, and we're going to go ahead and get that in the pot, and we want to bring that up to a boil. All right, now that our water's come to a boil, let's turn the heat down a little bit, and we can go ahead and add our cherries. Now, if you want to put them in a straining bag first, please feel free. If you want to do it afterwards, like I'm going to do it, please feel free. And I'm going to let that come back up to a simmer. All right. Now that our juice has come to a simmer, let's turn off the heat. And while we're at it, taking our freshly sanitized potato masher, may as well take an opportunity to help mash up some of these berries a bit more, to extract a bit more of that juice. And now, since our mixture is still nice and hot, we're going to go ahead and add 4 cups of sugar, or 2 pounds of sugar, depending on how you look at it. And let's go ahead and incorporate that. We might make an adjustment later on in the amount of sugar we want to add, depending on our hydrometer reading. We won't be able to determine that until after this has cooled down. So while we're waiting for this to cool down, we may as well start getting our tannin substitute mixture and our acid blend mixture together, so we can add that to the pot. To get our tannin substitute mixture going, we just need to add 1 black tea bag, and I'm going to use half a cup of water. No need to be precise. And we want to bring this up to a simmer. Now is as good a time as any to go ahead and add our strong black tea / tannin substitute to the mix. And let's wait till this comes down to room temperature. Now that our cherry juice mixture has come down to room temperature, we want to go ahead and transfer that into our fermenter. Now, a couple of ways you can do it. You can either just pour it directly into your fermenter, if you've got a wide mouth fermenter. If you've got a narrow mouth fermenter, then you'll be straining out the cherries, of course. I'm going to use a straining bag and strain my cherries that way, but they are going to go into the fermenter. It just makes it easier for me to keep it clean or do the cleanup afterwards. So we'll go ahead and start this process. All right. Now would also be a good time, as I've done with the other straining bag, is to give these just a little bit of a preliminary squeeze. Before tying them up, so we can get an idea of just roughly how much juice we actually have, and whether or not we need to top it off with any additional water to bring us up to our 1 gallon or 4 liters. And in my particular case, I am about just a little bit shy. So I'm going to add a little bit more water. Bring me up to where I need to be. And the next thing I want to do, since I've got space to do it, I'm going to take a hydrometer reading. All right, looks like we've got a hydrometer reading of 1.104. Now is as good a time as any to go ahead and get our acid blend substitute incorporated. And let's go ahead and add that to the mix. Okay, with that now done, we can go ahead and return our bags of cherries to the mix. No point wasting any wine. And following that, we want to put it on our cap. Because what I'm going to do after this is that we now need to convert our juice into wine by adding our yeast. Now again, with your yeast, you really don't need a whole package unless you're making 5 gallons. This is a 1 gallon batch, so I'm using 1/4 teaspoon of yeast. Kind of sprinkle it around best you can. For those of you who want to hydrate your yeast, please feel free. I've had nothing but success just by sprinkling my yeast around. I don't need to stir it up. I don't need to shake it up, although that wouldn't hurt. And what I'm going to do is, once I put the cover back on, for the next 3 days at least, I'm going to come in with a good wide spoon that I've sanitized, and I'm going to give it a vigorous stir to incorporate some more oxygen, help the yeast out a bit. After 3 days, I generally don't do it, but they say you can go up to 5, but I'm not going to test that theory out. This particular fermenter does have a built-in airlock, which is the little red dot you see. It does have a regular bubbler style airlock that goes with it, but I don't use that anymore because I already know my stuff is fermenting away. So all we need to do now is put a label on it. But one other thing about what comes next after this, since I'm dealing with fresh fruit, after 7 days, I'm going to take the bags out. I'm going to transfer this into our secondary container and start the process of secondary fermentation. Racking every 6 or 8 weeks or so until the wine gets clear, at which point in time we'll degas it, bottle it, pasteurize it, and get it ready for drinking. A good time for this wine is going to be about 12 months. All right, it's time to label our creation. What we have here is fresh cherry wine. We started on 6/4 of this date, and our starting gravity reading was 1.104. All right, so there we go. We put that aside. Give it a little bit of love and attention for the next 3 days. 7 days after we start, we go ahead and rack it secondary. After that, the occasional racks, and after that, the process continues. So if you like what you see here, please click on that subscribe button you see in the lower right-hand corner. It's not there for decorations. It's there for a purpose. Make use of it. I appreciate it. Trying to get 10,000, hopefully, before the end of the year, subscribers. But there we go. That's how I make 1 gallon batch of fresh cherry wine.